This is I Was 8, my weekly podcast, sharing stories about growing up in a small Canadian prairie town. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and next week we will be wrapping up Season 2 with a bike ride to the lake. But this week, I'm living large. I was 8.
Chapter 12. Hotel Dining.
I was pretty familiar with the hotel in our small town, mainly because my dad worked there. Dad was the manager and main bartender of the pub at the hotel, the only legal drinking establishment for miles and miles. Interestingly, Dad and many others referred to it as the beverage room. Dad worked at the hotel and ran the beverage room. Well, isn't that lovely? That doesn't sound like a term used over 50 years ago, does it? No, it sounds like one of our modern-day politically correct labels. No, it's not a pub or a beer parlor, gin joint, saloon, dive bar, roadhouse, booze bin, piss-up palace. No, it's the beverage room. Civilized people, in their party finest, sitting quietly and consuming beverages lovingly served up by the dignified publican of the establishment, Johnny. As you have guessed, the opposite happened there. The pub was where men went to drink beer, sometimes on paydays hard liquor. The goal? To get drunk. And if rowdiness ensued, so be it. Women weren't allowed in the bar without an escort. They had a separate, specially marked entrance for them and their own section. When I was 8, not once did I ever hear a woman complain about this discrimination. No self-respecting woman would be caught dead in the pub, and no man was interested in taking a date to the pub. That's not what the pub is for. You want to go on a date? We'll go to the church picnic. I can bring some booze in a thermos, but I'm not taking you to a place meant for drinking. Man drinking. Good old days, good times. I think my dad liked his job at the pub, or beverage room. Dad was known to enjoy the occasional beverage, but mainly he had had a lot of hard labor jobs in his life. For this gig, he had to shower and shave before work, put on a clean shirt, a tie, shine his shoes. He was a manager, for gosh sakes. Well, I had to shine his shoes. That was one of my jobs. The hotel was right downtown. Our town had 1,000 people. Downtown was one short street, a couple of stores, a bank, a cafe, the Ford dealership, and the hotel. The Wakaw Hotel. By the way, back then the streets in town didn't even have names. You referred to them as the street by the high school, the street with the hockey rink, the street where the doctor lives, and so on. The main street wasn't even called Main Street, although sometimes we called it the main drag. Downtown. Around the time I was 8, the hotel was purchased by the Bruin brothers, new in town, Manny and Louie. That's right. Manny and Louie. Sounds like two guys you wouldn't want to bump into after dark. Of course, they weren't that at all, but I always loved their names, Manny and Louie. They hired Johnny. Together, Manny, Louie, and Johnny were the main purveyors of food, lodging, and alcohol for the entire Wakaw census metropolitan area. Oh yes, sometimes people even came all the way from Cudworth. That's an actual town, by the way, down the road from us. Irrelevant to the story. I just wanted to say Cudworth. All right. Dad referred to Manny and Louie as his bosses. The boss wants me in early. The boss won't be in today. Hey, good to see you, boss. I hated the thought of my dad having a boss. To me, Dad was the boss of things. Well, at home it was Mom, but, out there in the world, I wanted my dad to be the boss. I asked him about that once. I'm sure he appreciated it. He said he was the boss of the beverage room, and that Manny and Louie were the boss of the whole hotel. Okay, whatever you say, boss. It's funny because I always hated that term boss, but today I hear it all the time. The guy at the convenience store calls me boss. Hey, how's it going today, boss? The guy after me, how's it going, chief? I always want to ask him, hold on. If I'm the boss, he's the chief, is he under me or do I report to him? The guy after chief, hey, what'll it be today, boss? Well, hold on. I thought you said I was the boss. He's the boss? How many bosses are there? Could I be chief? There's too many cooks, not enough Indians. How does that saying go? Well, never mind. It's racist. Anyway, meanwhile, back to being 8 and back at the hotel, Louie and his wife lived in the hotel. Manny and his wife, they had a bunch of kids, so they had a house in town. Sometimes on a Sunday evening, all 3 couples would get together at the hotel in the Louie private living quarters. Those were good times. If there were no guests checked in, us kids were allowed to use the entire hotel, except for the beverage room, to play hide and seek. The dining room, the lobby, all the rooms upstairs which were left unlocked when guests weren't in. Hide and seek was glorious. No one ever found you. No one ever found anyone. I was behind the armoire in room 213 the whole time. I was in the cupboard underneath the front desk. If you were it, a nightmare. But if you were the one hiding, fantastic. Speaking of the dining room, the Waka Hotel dining room, and it was pretty fancy, was one of the few places in town you could go out to eat. The main drag had a cafe. The motel gas station just across the highway had a lunch counter, and that was it. Of course, we never went to any of those places. If we were in the city, we went to a cafe, but if you were at home in town, there's food in the house. Eating out is a waste of money. You know who goes to those fancy restaurants? The hoi polloi. Now, I will pause there to answer your question. You see, my mom, a well-educated school teacher, I think confused the term hoi polloi with hoity-toity. Easy mistake to make. Hoi polloi, of course, are the masses, the great unwashed. In other words, everyone, at least most people, most of us. The rich and snobbish, that's the hoity-toity. I grew up believing the two meant the same thing. Any time you acted holier than thou, inevitably you'd hear, "Oh, look, Mr. Hoi Polloi, you think you're better than everyone." But we were the hoi polloi, and not the hoity-toity. If you acted hoity-toity, you were called the hoi polloi. "Oh, look, who wants to go out and eat at the cafe, hoi polloi." To this day, I have to pause and think when the terms come up. Let me see, I'm hoi, not hoity. I'm polloi, not toity. The hotel had guests occasionally. I can't imagine who might stay in our town if they didn't live there. Traveling salesmen, I guess. Although as I remember Dad's stories, most traveling salesmen usually stayed on a nearby farm with a farmer's daughter. And the farmer had a shotgun. And the guy said his name was Chuck, so the farmer shot him. I don't know, true story, I guess. Seemed to me that'd be pretty horrible, shooting a guy and everything, but I don't know, every time Dad told the story, all his buddies laughed. Said his name was Chuck and then the farmer shot him. Bah! Good one, Johnny. The dining room did do some business. I think it was the beverage room that really brought up the bottom line. I love that beverage room. Oh yeah, I was in there. It was closed on Sundays, and sometimes Dad would have to go in there on a Sunday for an hour and clean the valves or something. And he'd take me along. If I helped, I got a bag of chips. I'll never forget the smell in there, a stale, musty mixture of spilled beer and tobacco smoke embedded in the carpets and drapes, combined with a slight whiff of ammonia and other cleaning products, and the occasional waft of my dad's aftershave, Skin Bracer by Menon. At one point, the Bruin brothers found themselves in need of a cook for the dining room. They asked my dad if he knew anyone. Well, my dad's parents had just sold the farm and moved into town. Grandma Helen was a fantastic cook. Yes, but could she handle a lunch and supper crowd? She fed and raised 9 kids. Hired. Also around this time, and I can't remember the reason, but Dad was put in charge of school lunches for me. I think he managed to stuff some bologna between bread for a couple of days, but then he figured an easier way out of that chore. Why doesn't little Larry just run down the street to the hotel at noon, and Grandma will feed him there? Oh, yes, I like this idea. Hotel dining. I'll be eating at the hotel. I'll be the hoi polloi. I think the other one. This was exciting. Eating out in my own hometown. No more crappy dad's school lunches for this kid. The first day this was set to happen, I paid no attention in school all morning. All I could think about was my hotel lunch. I think the noon bell was still reverberating through the halls when I hit the back door of the hotel kitchen. Table for one, please. The linen napkins will go on my lap and not tucked into my shirt collar, 'cause I ain't no hick. First disappointment, you're not eating in the dining room, you're eating at the table in the kitchen. These days, people pay extra to have the kitchen chef's table experience, but back then, I wanted to be in the dining room with the hoity-polloi. The door to the dining room was slightly ajar, and I could see a couple of men in suits. Didn't recognize them, but they seemed to know each other. Mr. Scarlett from the grocery store came in. He sat with them. Another table had 2 more strangers, a man and a woman, dressed up as if it were Sunday. At one point, Dad came in and served them all beers. Hey, can I go in and say hi to Dad? No. All right. Well, at least the food would be good. Grams was a good cook. Could I see a menu, please? Today I'm making fried chicken. You're getting fried chicken. I hear the fried chicken is good here. Do you recommend the chicken? There's only fried chicken. Shut up, I'm bringing you a piece of chicken. You know what? Never mind the menu. I'm going to try the chicken. I loved my grandma's fried chicken. Side of mashed potatoes and some vegetables. After all that, I topped off my business lunch with a piece of cake. Well, I'm afraid I'm due back at the schoolyard. My compliments to the chef. See you tomorrow. This went on for most of the rest of the school year. Lunchtime, hotel dining. Then race back to the schoolyard for the last few minutes of lunch recess. Some of the town kids brought their lunch to school. Some went home for lunch, then rushed back to play. The bus kids, the farm kids, they all brought their lunches. When I got back to the schoolyard, they would all say, "Hey, Larry, didn't see you in the lunchroom today. Did you go home?" No, I take my lunches at the hotel dining room now. I told them I ate right in the dining room. They would always react the same way. Wow, lucky. But I had learned something over those days, a wisdom that has served me well over the years, and one that I imparted to my schoolmates right there by the swings. Luck has nothing to do with it, my friends. It's who you know.
I Was 8 is a weekly series written, produced, and voiced by Larry Fedoruk. A new episode every Thursday. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Larry Fedoruk, that's Fedoruk, can be reached at larryfedoruk37@gmail.com.